In a development that has sent shockwaves through the corridors of influence and power, the seizure of assets following the rejection of legal claims has become a landmark moment, one that captures the essence of accountability and the reach of justice. The legal system, often criticized for its slow pace or perceived vulnerability to manipulation, has demonstrated in this instance that it can operate decisively and effectively, imposing tangible consequences when claims are insufficient to shield property from lawful authority. The events leading up to this seizure reveal a complex web of attempts to protect assets, layering legal maneuvers, ownership structures, and procedural challenges in an effort to secure immunity. Yet, despite the meticulous orchestration of these strategies, the judge's decision was firm, unequivocal, and unyielding, illustrating that the law ultimately prioritizes substance over pretense. It is a stark reminder that even those accustomed to leveraging influence in multiple arenas cannot escape the fundamental scrutiny that governs legal accountability. The act of seizing assets is far more than a transactional enforcement of legal judgment. It is a symbolic assertion of authority, a statement that the mechanisms of the judiciary are active, operational, and capable of imposing real world consequences. For years, the targeted assets were shielded by layers of complexity, designed to obscure ownership, deflect liability, and resist external intervention. Structures that might have seemed impervious to ordinary oversight were brought into the full view of judicial examination. The rejection of the claims to protect these assets indicates that legal arguments, no matter how technically crafted or strategically deployed, must ultimately align with established principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability. The law does not bend to privilege, nor does it allow clever structuring to operate as a permanent barrier against enforcement. In this way, the seizure is not just a material event. It is a reaffirmation of the integrity of judicial processes and the principle that the law applies universally. The rejection of the protective claims also underscores the meticulous reasoning and scrutiny that judges employ when assessing the validity of legal arguments. Courts do not act arbitrarily. They operate within a framework of precedent, statutory interpretation, and procedural rigor. In this case, every argument presented to prevent the seizure was carefully examined against these standards. The judge's decision signals that despite any claims of technical entitlement, any assertions designed to circumvent enforcement, or any efforts to exploit legal ambiguities, the ultimate test lies in alignment with the core principles of justice. This reinforces public confidence in the legal system, demonstrating that expertise, influence, and resources cannot override the fundamental obligations imposed by law. It is a vivid illustration that the judiciary serves as a bulwark against the misuse of power, capable of intervening decisively when attempts are made to exploit perceived weaknesses. Equally important is the broader impact that such an event has on the perception of accountability. The seizure of assets following legal rejection is a tangible reminder that actions and decisions carry consequences, that ownership and control do not confer invulnerability, and that attempts to insulate property through legal claims are subject to rigorous examination. In the past, there have been instances where the complex nature of asset ownership and protective claims allowed individuals to evade immediate enforcement, creating a perception that the wealthy or powerful could operate outside the boundaries of accountability. This case disrupts that perception. It demonstrates that the legal system is capable of cutting through structural complexity to enforce obligations, and that justice is not contingent upon one's position or resources. The implications resonate beyond the immediate parties involved, sending a clear signal that the law functions as an equalizing force, capable of imposing consequences where they are due. The act of seizing assets also carries profound psychological and societal significance. Assets are often more than mere objects of financial value. They are symbols of influence, status, and control. When the legal system intervenes to remove these assets from the sphere of those who attempted to claim immunity, it represents a disruption of perceived power. This is a powerful narrative, one that captures public attention because it illustrates that no matter how untouchable or insulated an individual or entity may appear, the mechanisms of accountability remain operative. Observers and stakeholders in broader society see in this event the practical functioning of law and governance, reinforcing the concept that accountability is not theoretical, but operational. The material act of asset seizure is thus both a legal outcome and a societal lesson, conveying a tangible consequence for attempts to resist lawful authority. Furthermore, the process leading up to the seizure highlights the interplay between legal strategy and judicial oversight. The individuals involved invested significant effort into crafting claims designed to preserve their assets, drawing on legal expertise, precedent, and procedural nuance to make their case. This reflects an understanding of how the legal system operates and an attempt to navigate it in favor of protection. However, the rejection of these claims demonstrates that legal strategy, no matter how sophisticated, cannot substitute for substantive compliance with the law. The judiciary evaluates both form and substance, ensuring that claims are not merely superficially plausible, but genuinely defensible under the principles of justice. This aspect emphasizes the importance of integrity and legality in financial and structural arrangements, warning that the law is capable of seeing through technicalities that are intended to obscure responsibility. The implications of this seizure extend into multiple domains. Economically, the removal of assets can alter control, liquidity, and operational dynamics for the parties involved. Legally, it establishes precedent and reinforces the interpretation of claims that attempt to insulate property from enforcement. Politically and socially, it demonstrates that accountability is actionable and that attempts to avoid scrutiny are not guaranteed success. The ruling itself and the subsequent enforcement serve as reference points for future cases, signaling to both legal professionals and the public that the courts are vigilant and assertive in upholding the principles they are entrusted to protect. The visibility of such an event amplifies its significance, transforming it from a private legal matter into a broader discourse about fairness, responsibility, and the limits of influence. This case also illustrates the broader narrative of checks and balances in society. Assets, no matter how substantial or strategically held, are ultimately subject to regulation, oversight, and enforcement. When claims to protect these assets are rejected, it validates the efficacy of institutional mechanisms designed to prevent abuse and ensure compliance. The seizure acts as a corrective force, restoring equilibrium where attempts were made to circumvent accountability. It is a reminder that legal structures exist not merely as abstract frameworks, but as operational tools capable of enforcing societal norms and expectations. The rejection of protective claims and the subsequent seizure reaffirm that these structures are effective and responsive, maintaining the principle that law governs all participants equally. Finally, the dramatic nature of this event lies not only in the seizure itself, but in the broader message it conveys about accountability, fairness, and the operation of law. It demonstrates the consequences of attempting to shield assets from scrutiny, the importance of aligning legal arguments with substantive principles, and the capacity of the judiciary to act decisively in the face of complex maneuvers. The event serves as both a warning and a lesson that no claim is invulnerable, that assets are not immune from lawful intervention, and that the ultimate measure of legality is the alignment with justice rather than the sophistication of defensive arguments. In this, the seizure and the legal rejection represent a profound reaffirmation of the rule of law, a tangible manifestation of accountability, and a demonstration that justice, while deliberate and procedural, is ultimately effective and impartial. Accountability is a principle often spoken about but less frequently observed in practice, particularly when it comes to those who wield immense power, influence, or resources. In many societies, there is a perception, sometimes justified, sometimes exaggerated, that certain individuals operate above the law, shielded by wealth, status, or connections. Yet the recent legal developments remind us in the most vivid way possible that no position of influence, no accumulation of resources, and no network of supporters can render one immune from scrutiny. The concept of accountability is not abstract. It is operational, enforceable, and, when applied to those who believe themselves untouchable, profoundly impactful. When the legal system asserts its authority over powerful individuals or entities, it reinforces a fundamental truth. Power does not exempt anyone from responsibility. Every claim, Every maneuver and every action undertaken by those in positions of privilege must ultimately be evaluated within the framework of law and principle, and when it fails to meet that standard, consequences follow. The reality of holding the powerful accountable is often more complex than it is with ordinary citizens. Legal strategies, financial structures, and personal networks can be deployed to shield influence and protect interests, creating layers of insulation that make enforcement a challenging endeavor. In such contexts, the rejection of protective claims and the imposition of consequences send a resounding message that these layers, no matter how intricate, are not impervious. The judicial process, often methodical and deliberative, is capable of piercing through sophisticated defenses to examine the essence of actions and claims. When the law asserts itself in these circumstances, it is a reminder that accountability is not merely a moral ideal, it is an operational reality, enforceable against all individuals regardless of their standing. This demonstrates that justice is not selective. It does not favor the wealthy or powerful, nor does it yield to intimidation or influence. Its authority is universal, applying to every individual equally, and this universality is the cornerstone of trust in legal and societal systems. Holding the powerful accountable also serves a critical social function. Society often observes the actions of influential individuals closely, and when enforcement occurs, it reinforces the public's confidence that rules and laws are meaningful and applicable. When accountability is enforced, it communicates a broader principle. The same standards of behavior, compliance, and legality that apply to the average citizen also govern those at the top. The visibility of consequences for the powerful is therefore not merely a legal or financial event, it is a symbolic and societal one. It reassures communities that the legal system operates as intended, that privilege does not guarantee impunity, and that influence, while potentially extensive, does not confer exemption from responsibility. This is essential for maintaining social cohesion, trust in institutions, and the perception that justice is not arbitrary but consistent and impartial. The mechanisms of accountability in such cases are multifaceted. They often involve the interplay of investigation, legal scrutiny, and judicial enforcement. For individuals accustomed to leveraging influence to protect themselves, the rigorous evaluation of their actions can be jarring. Every asset, transaction, or claim is subject to examination, and every legal argument must withstand the scrutiny of precedent, statutory interpretation, and procedural rigor. When claims fail to meet these standards, the consequences are enforced not out of vindictiveness, but as a matter of principle. Accountability, in this sense, is a corrective force. It restores balance, where attempts have been made to operate above the law, and demonstrates that even the most sophisticated strategies cannot supplant adherence to legal standards. This is particularly significant in cases involving high-profile or influential actors, where the stakes are both symbolic and material. The enforcement of accountability against powerful individuals also highlights the inherent tension between influence and principle. In many instances, power is associated with an ability to shape outcomes, bend rules, or delay consequences. Yet the law, when properly applied, serves as a counterweight to these tendencies. By rejecting claims designed to protect assets or evade responsibility, the judicial system demonstrates that influence is not absolute, and that principles of fairness and legality ultimately prevail. This enforcement illustrates that the rule of law is not a passive concept, but an active mechanism capable of regulating behavior at all levels. It reinforces the idea that responsibility is a non-negotiable aspect of societal structure, and that accountability is not contingent on wealth, status, or connections. Moreover, accountability for the powerful sends a crucial message to those who might consider testing the boundaries of influence. It communicates that attempts to circumvent responsibility through wealth, status, or intimidation will face substantial obstacles. This deterrent effect is a vital aspect of legal enforcement. It signals that actions have consequences, regardless of who is undertaking them. By holding those in positions of power to the same standards as everyone else, the system establishes a precedent that reinforces fairness and integrity across the board. It demonstrates that influence does not create immunity and that the pursuit of justice is not selective. The powerful, therefore, must operate within the confines of legal and ethical expectations, or they too will be subject to scrutiny and consequence. Another dimension of accountability for the powerful is the psychological and symbolic impact on both the individuals involved and the public. For those accustomed to operating with relative impunity, facing enforcement actions can be both disruptive and instructive. It serves as a tangible reminder that their influence is bounded by law and that attempts to evade responsibility can be thwarted. For the public, witnessing such enforcement validates the integrity of institutions and demonstrates that societal rules apply universally. It bridges the gap between perception and reality, showing that even those who might seem invincible are not beyond the reach of oversight. This dual effect, disciplinary for the individuals involved and reassuring for society, reinforces the importance of accountability as both a practical and moral instrument. Accountability for the powerful also encourages transparency and discourages attempts to exploit opaque structures or complex legal frameworks for personal gain. When enforcement occurs, it shines a light on previously protected or concealed activities, signaling that attempts to obscure actions or assets will not succeed indefinitely. This fosters an environment in which transparency is incentivized and strategic concealment is penalized. By applying legal scrutiny rigorously and uniformly, the system ensures that the powerful cannot rely solely on procedural complexity to escape consequences. This not only strengthens the efficacy of legal enforcement, but also promotes ethical behavior by reinforcing the expectation that actions must withstand both legal and public examination. Furthermore, the principle of accountability extends beyond individual cases to influence broader institutional and societal norms. When powerful individuals are held responsible, it establishes a standard that affects peers, subordinates, and institutions. It creates a ripple effect, shaping behaviors, policies, and approaches to compliance. Organizations and networks connected to influential actors must recognize that their actions, decisions, and structures will be examined with rigor, and that attempts to exploit privilege are unlikely to remain unchallenged. This elevates the importance of ethical conduct and adherence to law throughout the spheres influenced by powerful actors, reinforcing systemic integrity and reducing opportunities for abuse. The process of enforcing accountability against those with influence also demonstrates the interplay between patience, diligence, and precision in legal proceedings. Legal cases involving powerful individuals often require extensive documentation, investigation, and scrutiny. Every argument must be meticulously analyzed, every claim examined against precedent, and every procedural step carefully executed. The rejection of claims designed to shield assets or evade responsibility reflects not only the strength of the law, but the tenacity of those tasked with upholding it. It shows that diligence, adherence to principle, and careful evaluation can overcome attempts to manipulate or obstruct legal outcomes. This reinforces the idea that the law is not easily circumvented, even by those with resources and influence, and that accountability is achievable when institutions operate effectively. Finally, holding the powerful accountable embodies a profound affirmation of the principles that underpin a functioning society. It reinforces the idea that power comes with responsibility, that influence is bounded by law, and that ethical and legal obligations are universal. By applying consequences, the legal system demonstrates that fairness is not selective, that justice is not conditional, and that the principles of accountability apply equally to all. This creates a culture in which actions, decisions, and claims are evaluated on their merits and compliance with legal standards rather than on the status or connections of those involved. The enforcement of accountability against powerful actors is thus a testament to the resilience and effectiveness of societal institutions, the universality of law, and the enduring principle that no one is above it. In any society that values justice, the tension between principle and privilege is a constant theme. Privilege, whether it derives from wealth, status, influence, or position, often provides a perception of insulation, a sense that certain individuals or entities can act with impunity, shielded from consequences that ordinary people face every day. The rejection of claims designed to protect assets in this case illustrates a fundamental truth. Principles, not privilege, are the ultimate arbiter of justice. No matter how well crafted a legal argument may be or how deeply entrenched power may appear, the law evaluates substance over status, integrity over influence, and fairness over personal advantage. When principle triumphs over privilege, it signals a reaffirmation of the rule of law and reinforces the notion that justice is a standard that transcends social or economic position. The concept of principle over privilege is not merely abstract, it is operational, enforceable, and impactful in real world terms. In this case, the rejection of claims that attempted to shield assets demonstrates that no individual can rely solely on their position or influence to escape accountability. Privilege may provide temporary advantages, allowing for maneuvering, negotiation, or delay, but it cannot substitute for adherence to legal or ethical standards. When principles are applied consistently, they create an environment in which fairness and responsibility are prioritized, and attempts to circumvent justice are met with resistance. This serves as a reminder that the law is designed not for the protection of the powerful alone, but for the maintenance of a society in which obligations, rights, and consequences are applied universally. Privilege often manifests as a combination of social influence, financial resources, and access to legal expertise. In many high profile cases, these factors are leveraged to construct elaborate defenses, obscure ownership, or present technically plausible arguments for exemption from accountability. Yet the law examines the substance beneath the form, seeking to determine whether actions align with established principles and whether claims hold merit beyond superficial or procedural justifications. The rejection of protective claims in this instance illustrates the effectiveness of a principle-based system. It underscores that while privilege may complicate or delay enforcement, it cannot ultimately override justice when the core principles of legality, fairness, and accountability are applied rigorously. This dynamic reflects a broader societal expectation that legal and ethical standards are not negotiable and cannot be supplanted by social or financial status. The triumph of principle over privilege carries profound symbolic weight. It challenges the notion that power can act independently of consequence, demonstrating that the law is capable of exerting authority even in the face of substantial influence. This has implications far beyond the immediate legal or financial outcome. It reshapes societal perceptions about the reach and effectiveness of justice, signaling that the systems designed to uphold fairness are operational and effective. When principles govern the outcome rather than privilege, it reinforces trust in institutions, assures the public that no one is beyond scrutiny, and demonstrates that the concept of accountability is not theoretical but actionable. Observers are reminded that society's ethical and legal foundations are grounded in universal standards, not in the perceived immunity of the elite. In practical terms, applying principle over privilege requires meticulous legal scrutiny and a commitment to integrity from those tasked with enforcing the law. Judges, investigators, and attorneys must evaluate claims with rigor, ensuring that technicalities or strategic maneuvering do not obscure the substance of the matter. In this case, every argument presented to shield assets was examined against established legal principles, and the rejection of these claims demonstrates the judiciary's ability to enforce standards impartially. This process highlights the importance of diligence and expertise in upholding justice. It illustrates that adherence to principle is not passive, but requires active engagement, careful analysis, and the courage to make difficult decisions in the face of influential opposition. The principle over privilege dynamic also has a deterrent effect. When high-profile claims fail despite substantial resources, it communicates a broader lesson to others who might seek to exploit their position for advantage. Attempts to manipulate legal structures, obscure responsibilities, or leverage influence are less likely to succeed when enforcement consistently favors principle. This cultivates a culture in which compliance with law and ethics becomes not merely advisable but essential. Organizations, individuals, and networks that operate within systems where privilege might previously have conferred protection now recognize that integrity and adherence to principle are non-negotiable. The rejection of protective claims and the enforcement of accountability create tangible consequences for attempts to circumvent justice, reinforcing the primacy of principle over the temporary advantages afforded by privilege. Moreover, the application of principle over privilege strengthens societal norms and expectations. It establishes a clear boundary between acceptable and unacceptable conduct, demonstrating that ethical and legal standards are applicable universally. Privilege, by contrast, has the potential to erode these norms if left unchecked, suggesting that influence can substitute for responsibility. When principle prevails, it restores equilibrium, showing that the law functions as intended and that society's rules apply equally to all. This is particularly important in contexts where public trust in institutions may be fragile. Visible enforcement actions, such as the rejection of protective claims and the seizure of assets, serve as a reminder that justice is not arbitrary, selective, or malleable to power. It is deliberate, consistent, and grounded in universally accepted standards.